my passion for music actually started early on when I must have been 8 or 9 years old when I started playing guitar, and it was thanks to my father, who's he loves music. He plays the bass a little bit, and actually by the time I was 14 or 15 already, I was doing gigs, performing in little clubs around Rome with my father and with another friend of mine on drums, and that's kind of how I got started. And yeah, I guess my first initial type of music I was into, I was primarily influenced by my dad, who was a bit of a hippie, and he was into 60s music, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, of course, Eric Clapton. And so I kind of started with that, and then one of my first great teachers that kind of really got me into seriously studying music, he got me involved with jazz, and that's been with me ever since. I still consider that one of my primary styles of music. So yeah, I primarily play two different styles of music. I have my jazz band, and we play from pretty much straight ahead jazz up to some funk, fusion, rock kind of stuff. And I also have a different project where I play house music, and so that's interacting with DJs and playing with them in nightclubs and stuff like that. And the two are very different in some ways. The jazz is much more technical, much more challenging, in terms of technique and creativity in the compositional realm. And the house music is challenging in different ways. It's it's much more simple rhythmically and whatnot, which in itself means it's harder to make it interesting from a musician's standpoint. And so both are really interesting for me. When the DJ is good, when we're playing house music, it's like interacting with a drummer. Like when I play jazz, and one of the coolest things is when you're playing rhythmical stuff, you're playing with the drummer, and he messes with the beat. He kind of pushes you and create like rhythmic intricacies that work really well together. And okay, some DJs don't do that. Some DJs will just hit play and play the track, and then it's basically just a performance about you and the audience. But two great DJs, DJ Dove, who's a guy, a Cuban American guy I play with, and DJ Maurizio Taruggi, who's an Italian guy. They messed with it, man. It's really interesting. It's kind of interactive. Basically, the coolest thing about music is or at least improvised music, is that you'll do something that will spur the other person you're playing with to do something in return, which in turn will create a circle, and you're playing together. You're playing off of each other. And but yeah, basically we improvise. The same exact thing as going to a jam session in Paris with a bunch of musicians you never saw before, and you just say, let's jam. It's the same thing. So it's just a different medium, like when recorded music started, all the old-fashioned musicians said, oh, this is going to kill the music industry. When television started, they said the same things. Electronic music is just a new way to express your art. So I'm not scared of it. I love it. I'm pulled towards it. Yeah, I was born in Rome, and I was there for the first 18 years of my life. And I went to actually the first country I ever lived in, other than Italy, was in Cuba. I lived in Havana for a year. I studied there music, primarily Latin jazz. And then I went to Paris for a year, and then to Boston, where I went to Berklee College of Music. And now I'm here in New York. It's been almost 3 years since I moved here. I guess Paris is where I learned music the old-fashioned way, which is going to jam sessions. I was kind of going to a school. I would show up once or twice a week. But what I would do almost every night is go to a jam session and try to learn by my own mistakes, by being embarrassed when you didn't play well in front of all your friends and all the professionals, great musicians there. You kind of went home, studied like crazy, and then the next day hopefully you do better. And a trial and error process that I think is the way Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and all these guys did it. So yeah, Berklee College of Music, which is not to be confused with Berkeley in California, which is not a music school. It was an amazing experience for me, and I met so many musicians that I perform with to this day. In fact, actually, all three of the musicians I'm playing with on Wednesday um, I met at Berkeley, and then just like everybody else from Berkeley, we moved to New York when we're done, and we keep playing together. So yeah, I'm really happy I went there. Lots of amazing input from some of the best musicians in the world who teach there.
Good.
I think definitely for music, both jazz and different genres, New York is the cutting edge. New York is where stuff happens. New York is where, multiple Grammy Award winners in any style. When they perform in big stadiums and arenas and stuff in Europe and Japan and Africa, whatever, and you'll see them in tiny little bars they've been playing in since the 70s. Seriously, like for example, Mike Stern, this famous musician that we recorded in our latest album, is extremely famous. He plays in stadiums in Europe, and every Monday night he'll play at the 55 bar, a really nice little local bar in the West Village, and it costs like $10 to get in, and it's like you're here and he's there and he's playing, and you talk to him and whatever. That's how we met him, and that's how we hired him for our recording. So it's that reality that New York has that just, it's like perfect. I feel like, looking back, it's kind of like I can't remember a time when I didn't want to come here eventually. If I were to look at a difference between the way music is perceived and performed in Italy versus here, it's, at least in jazz, they tend to be much more traditional. They consider it not jazz if it's experimental, if it's new, if it's trying to mesh together different styles of music, trying to create something, that didn't exist before. And I think that is kind of in conflict with the general idea of what music, and jazz specifically, should be, because you're meant to be in the cutting edge. You're meant to be creating new stuff every day with music, and that's why I find myself much more at home in the environment here in New York, where everything is so fresh and innovative. So my jazz quartet is myself on guitar, an acoustic violin, bass, and drums. And it's, I guess the heart of the band is the collaboration between myself and the violinist, Serena Suna, who is an extraordinary violinist who happens to do the same kind of thing I do. She plays both house music and jazz. Yeah, it's really interesting. We get a really cool sound because although the violin is not a very popular instrument in jazz, and for that matter, the guitar is not as popular as the saxophone or the piano, although more than the violin. But the only kind of setting in which it's been used traditionally, the violin, in a jazz environment, is for traditional stuff like Stefan Grappelli and Django Reinhardt. So yeah, we tend to go from there and go a little more in a fusion funk direction. Kind of John Scofield, Mike Stern area. And actually, we recorded our latest album. We had the pleasure of having Mike Stern, who was I think a 4-time Grammy Award nominee, who played with Miles Davis, and Dave Weckl, the drummer of Chick Corea. They played with us on our latest album, and which was great. And the album is for sale. So we tend to go a little more in a more modern direction. I use a lot of polyrhythms and odd time signatures in my music, metric modulations, very angular melodies. Oh yeah, and I also teach these days. I have a bunch of really nice students. My youngest one is a 5-year-old girl who I think has the potential to become the best of my students.
Really?
She's really good. She's the lessons are kind of short, but she asks questions. She asks for could you clarify this or that? Really interested. And on the other end of the spectrum, I have a student who he's actually so good that the other week, for the very first time in my life, I called one of my own students to play a gig with me.
Good.
So that was like, yes, I succeeded in making one of my students, professional. Because technically, it wasn't a high-profile gig, but he was there. He did a great job, performed, and.